Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello guys, hope that you are good. Today I'm going to tell you about the pioneers in the field of immunology. Immunology is concerned with your immune systems, different organs or cells or molecules inside your bodies are doing this job of protecting you against the microorganisms or some kind of antigens that enter your body. But not long ago, we knew much about the immune system or these cells that are protecting us, that are part of our bodies. We even didn't know about different types of microbes, uh, even 150 or 200 years ago, or knowledge of the microbes, which are the most abundant, living beings in this world. Uh, our knowledge of all these microbes was very limited, and we didn't know much about it. With the advancement of certain tools like microscopes and etc., and some staining techniques, we came to know about different types of microorganisms. And then in the 20th century, we started using these microbes for different purposes, like for our benefit, in which we learned how to study the genomes or the DNA or RNA of these microbes and how to make use of that information for the betterment of humanity. But even if you go back 150 or 200 years back, you would not find a great deal of information about the microbes. And even if you take the case of a human body, the microbes associated with the human body, which are present on the surface of the human body, are the microbes present inside the human body. The number of these microbial cells is 10 times greater than the number of our own body cells, which signifies the role of these microbes that they are, playing in homeostasis and different functions of our bodies. Physiologically or functionally, they are the most important cells in our body. They exist there. And you guys know about Louis Pasteur, who lived from 1822 to 1895. He came up with the germ theory of infectious diseases. I'm telling you about Louis Pasteur here because he was a famous guy, in science, and he discovered this method of pasteurization. And everybody, the science students, they usually know about Louis Pasteur. That in microbiology, he actually had done a great deal of initial work. And there was another guy whose name was Robert Koch, and he lived from 1843 to 1910, and he is famous for his studies on the etiology of infectious diseases, or the causes of causative agents of infectious diseases, particularly tuberculosis. He did some pioneering work on tuberculosis. And although these guys, they were microbiologists, but the later guy, Robert Koch, um, raised an important question, which laid the foundation of, in a sense, it laid the foundation of modern immunology. And the question was that is the host a helpless prey of pathogenic microbes, or is it equipped with an efficient defense mechanisms to combat its invaders? In simple words, uh, Robert Koch, he, put forward this question whether the host is completely defenseless against the microbes, because by that time the knowledge of infectious diseases was growing. He was working in this area. And the similarly, also Louis Pasteur was also working on different microbes, and this knowledge that the microbes actually are causing different types of diseases in humans and other species that knowledge actually was growing by that time, and it was well known. So, uh, what were these pioneering scientists, microbiologists, actually, the modern microbiologists thinking about? Whether the host was completely defenseless, or, well, the host, the human or some other animal species, would have something to fight with the microbe. So these famous microbiologists, both of them, Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch, they were of the same opinion. And what was that opinion? Pasteur and Koch favored the notion that the host was defenseless, that the host did not have any defense system or immune system that we know of today. So they thought that the host doesn't have any option but to succumb to uh, these or pathogenic conditions, and that the host does not have or do not have any kind of protective systems or protection system. So in there was some guys, for instance, this guy that you see here on the left, it's Ilya Mechnikov. He was a Russian zoologist turned immunologist. He was actually a zoologist, but he developed some interest in immunology. This guy also was working in, he did some pioneering experiments, you know, and he discovered, phagocytosis. He discovered that some, cells in our bodies are responsible for phagocytosis. And uh, intracellular killing in host defense by the process of phagocytosis was what this guy Mechnikov, the Russian zoologist turned immunologist, actually discovered. So he discovered phagocytosis in vertebrates and began analyzing phagocytes' function in infectious diseases such as anthrax, sepsis, and tuberculosis. Based on these studies, he distinguished macrophages from microphages, which we now call neutrophils according to the form of their nucleus. So it was a very important discovery at that time, and this discovery completely negated the notion of both Robert Koch and Louis Pasteur, because they were thinking that the host was completely defenseless and there was no immune system in the host, in human beings or in some other animal species. But this discovery of Metnikov proved that the host was not defenseless, that there is some kind of defense present in the whole, in the form of these cells, because these cells that he observed uh, were eating up upon other cells, or they were eating upon different types of microbes. These were the body cells, the macrophages that he just named them macrophages. Um, and he not only discovered these macrophages, but also he called some cell as microphages, which are today called the neutrophils. So both of these cells have the ability to just, engulf the pathogens, bacteria, for instance, if they enter the body. And he had observed this for the first time. So this was a proof, actually, that the host or the human or other animal species are not defensive. That there is a defense system which is comprised of different types of cells that are eating upon the pathogens or the microbes that enter our bodies. And later on, these other guys that you see here in the left, this is Bering and this is Ehrlich. These guys who were actually, assistants of Robert Koch that we discussed on the first slide, Both of them were assistants of Robert Koch, and they also did some pioneering work, and they discovered a lot of different aspects of our immune system or the defense system. So they furthered the work of Mechnikov, and they identified antibodies as crucial counterpart to the toxic activities of bacteria. So uh, these two who were the pupils of Robert Koch, who did not believe in the defense system at that time, actually were responsible for the discovery of important components of the immune system. So they were colleagues for many years, and finally Nobel Prize winners. They together were awarded Nobel Prize in 1908, both for their work on the diphtheria serum. Bering, uh, you know, uh, was a translational immunologist, and the other one, Ehrlich, was a basic immunologist. So Ehrlich not only discovered uh, antibodies that we know today, which are important, tools of the adaptive immune system. They also defined immunity as immediate and delayed immunity. Today we call it innate and adaptive immunity, because adaptive immunity would take some time to develop, because antibodies are developed against different types of pathogens when they attack our bodies. While the innate immune system acts immediately when the pathogen enters our bodies. That's why we today call it innate immunity, innate immune system, but at that time they were calling it as, immediate uh, immunity. So the Ehrlich not only discovered antibodies, this guy also discovered mast cells, which are very important cells for immune system and are involved in different types of allergic or hypersensitivity reactions in our bodies. And lots of people who suffer from different types of skin rashes, urticaria or psoriasis, or uh, conditions like these, which in which there appears a rash on the skin, or some gastrointestinal conditions, or some cardiac conditions. In all these different conditions, these mast cells are involved, because these are cells filled with granules, and those granules again are filled with different toxic substances, different hydrolytic enzymes or different cytokines that are responsible for increasing the inflammatory response, or different types of other chemokines and leukotrienes are there. So the mast cells, which are involved in different types of allergies, were discovered by this guy earlier. Similarly, antibody production, I told you, the complement system that was discovered for the first time by Ehrlich as well. And he also described the different types of receptors that were responsible for, activation of different cells, or, entry of different, antigens or different substances in the cell. And Ehrlich not only did this, Ehrlich also was responsible for discovering a method. He discovered several methods, in which one is more important from the diagnostic point of view, uh, because he stained different blood cells, or identified different blood cells with the help of that technique, the staining technique that he discovered. And that was that brought about a great revolution, because before Ehrlich, we didn't know how to fractionate different cells, on the different blood cells, how to identify one cell from another cell, and what is the significance of doing this practice. Today, wherever you go, to whenever you go to some hospital or some lab uh, or some doctor, the first thing that the doctor would look at is your blood report. That what has actually happened to the blood cells, the amount of blood cells or the number of blood cells. Because if the number of blood cells goes up or it goes down, it tells the doctors about different conditions. For instance, if somebody's white blood cells have jumped very high, he is a suspect for blood cancer. So if somebody is eosinophils, for instance, or basophils, or these cells have gone up, so this guy probably would have some parasitic conditions or some microbacterial infections. So all these blood tests or the count of the blood, which is possible now with the help of different instruments that we do, were first started by Ehrlich. So these guys actually did the pioneering work in immunology. They started with their work in the 19th century, and they also did, they were awarded in the 20th century for all that work. They are important. Other guys who did some work which is related to immunology, that was a kind of abstract thing, like Edward Jenner discovered, that the cowpox and antisera actually can work against smallpox, and some Chinese who were also aware of this kind of technique that we today know is vaccination. So these guys are some very old stories about developing, immunity against certain infections during certain outbreaks, which took place a lot of time ago in history. All those happenings actually had taken place, and there were observations, but uh, that couldn't lead to a separate discipline. For instance, Edward Jenner had rightly observed that the cowpox, legions or the cowpox antiserum can protect you against smallpox, but he did not introduce this, did not introduce vaccination actually, because the underlying mechanism was not investigated until very late. Um, and it was Ehrlich who actually identified antibodies as molecules produced by some cells in our bodies that are responsible for neutralizing different antigens. So that's for today. Hope to see you next time. And thank you very much for listening.